Mysterious visitors from another land, exiles from the grip of a tyrant. Pupils, monks, and Tavians have come to the Four Kingdoms, but from where? Hi, my name is Ross Watson. I am the lead designer of Myth Tales of Legend.
And I'm JM, and I'm the lead writer of Myth Tales of Legend.
And we're doing this from home because it's quarantine.
Huzzah!
It's lockdown, so we're doing it from home. Please forgive the production values. We're still working on that. We are getting better.
We are.
I think as time goes on.
Every week a little better. That's the goal, right?
Well, I mean, I think it's fair to say, like, if actually our viewers should know that the very first time we tried this, JM and I, we recorded 2 whole shows, and we had to do them over again.
We did.
It didn't work out just quite right, but we're better. We're better now. I promise.
Better every time, a little better.
Progress.
That's right.
So what is today's episode about, JM?
So today's episode, we're going to talk about the Tavians, the Blessed Isle that they come from, the home that they call Hourani, and what they are, why they're here, why are they unique, and sort of what are the plots and stories that drive the Tavians. But first, we have some comments, and so this one was for Ross. If the Lucanine are one of the top 3 coolest developments moving the world of Myth 4, what are the other 2?
So I think what Tim is asking, Tim Chase, he's asking about is we mentioned in a previous video that the world of myth is advancing, that things are happening in the world that are new and different. And he asked about the Naga and the Tavians. Well, the Tavians is definitely one of those things that does move the world forward. As for the Naga, you will have to wait and see whether they are one of those 3 things that moves the world forward or not. We will simply smile mysteriously at that. Maybe. But Christian Lanzing has an even better question.
Yeah, he asked if we're in a cult. And I mean, I don't know.
Are you guys in a cult?
I don't know about Ross, but I mean, yeah, I'm in a cult. Like, we're not in a cult together. We're just, we're in cults separately.
We are in separate cults. I am drinking Kool-Aid.
That's
so
right.
There's that.
My Kool-Aid is coffee. It's mandated by the all-high autarch of the organization I belong to. It's coffee or nothing. So
we're totally joking.
Yeah,
we are not
100%.
part of it. But so there we go. That's good question though. Thanks, Christian. So we're going to jump right into it today. This is our lore video, and every other episode of the Campfire Chats is focused on lore, with the other half being on game mechanics. And we just covered the last section of character creation for Myth Tales of Legend. So today in our lore video, we're discussing the lore of something that is really brand new to the world of myth. We worked with Keith and Brian, the original creators of the world of myth. These guys are really great to work with about the lore of the setting. And in the limited edition book for the world of myth, there were these really interesting pictures of mongoose people. And I asked them, I said, who are these guys? And they said, well, why don't you tell us? So JM and I got together and said, hey, let's figure out who these people are, where they're from, and what their deal is. And that's kind of the basis, the foundation for this entire thing. So JM, take it away. What is the island, the Blessed Isle of Hourani, and why is it important?
So basically, as we were kind of talking back and forth about it, we came up with this idea that it's very clear in the lore of the world of myth that this is not the only world. And, things like the World Eater bore holes through the dimensions. And during the Age of Legends, they've opened up these portals to other realms. We kind of leaned into that with the Lucanine as well. And so we established that the Tavians are from another world. They left their world in exile, and during the cataclysm that kind of started that journey, they've sort of forgot much of what they had before. And so their history really is just since they've come to the world of myth. But we created this Blessed Isle as sort of a why hasn't the Four Kingdoms really known about them before? We've seen hints and pictures of them, but they've not been a main part of that. So the Tavians came to the world of myth during the Age of Steel, fleeing some cataclysm on an exodus of some sort, and they arrived on this island. And this island has sort of kept them isolated from the main conflicts of the Four Kingdoms. Save for the Naga, right? The Naga kind of are the threat in the seas and in the oceans. Plus, there's just some great symmetry between mongoose people hating snake people that we could not ignore.
Absolutely. That's classic.
Yeah, it's classic.
Now, one quick question, though. Isn't it true that Hourani actually had people on it when the Tavians arrived? So it's not just an island full of Tavians.
Right. The Tavians kind of, though, quickly organized and kind of developed Hourani into this sort of idealized society, right? It allowed them to develop to the point where the internal contemplation and retrospective necessary to sort of develop traditions and archetypes like the monk or the pupil, where they could just focus on like self-perfection and diving into one specific weapon and training and becoming the master of that. That's not something that the Four Kingdoms have enjoyed a respite long enough to really kind of enjoy or know about. And so we came up with the idea that the Blessed Island has developed almost in isolation from the war against the darkness, but we couldn't leave it like that.
Right. They have a very spiritual civilization there. They have an advanced civilization. There's a lot of respect for art and for, as you say, like development of skill. Like the mastery of a particular thing is very well respected.
Yes,
on
I think of is it Ken Watanabe's character from The Last Samurai that
yes.
You could spend your entire life looking for a perfect cherry blossom and it would not be a life wasted. That was sort of kind of the wisdom and the thought that we wanted to bring to the Tavians.
So in this is Tom Cruise the mongoose in this one?
No, I don't think so. I mean, maybe.
So Ken Watanabe is the mongoose. Okay. But yeah, I'm sorry, that's a terrible joke, but I see your inspiration on that, and I love it. But so who the Blessed Isle, Hourani, is exotic. Mm-hmm. It is not very well known by the people of the Four Kingdoms. I imagine very few people from the Four Kingdoms have even visited it. Instead, it has been the people from Hourani who have journeyed out to the Four Kingdoms.
Yes, and that's where we get the pupils and the monks from. There was this great leader at the start of the Age of Heroes who came to the Four Kingdoms on this sort of mission to enlighten and prepare the way for the joining of the Blessed Isle and the Four Kingdoms into this sort of peaceful revolution of art and science and personal development. And so this master kind of went around founding these monasteries up and down the length of the Four Kingdoms. And that's where we get, with her came a number of other Tavians who kind of were aligned with the same ideals and the same thoughts. And so they sort of built these small enclaves throughout the Four Kingdoms. And that's where we get the monks and the pupil schools that your characters will get to be a part of.
Now, they didn't just come here. I mean, that's a very noble goal. I do think it's great. But there's more to that story, isn't there?
There is. So as we kind of developed it and we were looking at it, we wanted to, the Tavians have had this antagonistic relationship with the Naga. The Naga haven't been able to get a foothold, and no one exists in the world of myth without coming under the eye of the darkness. No matter
exactly.
how far removed, how isolated you think you are, the darkness is bigger than the world of myth. And so you can't hide from it. And so we kind of started working through developments of ideas of what could we do with this. And so the idea was that all of these Tavians who have come to the Four Kingdoms, not all of them were part of this peaceful mission. Some of them were sent to kind of scout and get the lay of the land and send information back to the Blessed Isle. But the other thing was there is a Tavian who kind of saw all of this, saw the whole of the Blessed Isle and everything they built, and could not help but think, well, what if we put this to a different use. The darkness was whispering into the heart of the tyrant. And basically, the tyrant saw some roadblocks towards his ascendancy on the Blessed Isle, and very cunningly, with the craftiness and words laced with the cunning of darkness, convinced these roadblocks that, hey, you need to go and you need to share your wisdom with the world. We have your wisdom here. But look at these people in the Four Kingdoms. Look at how needful they are of this wisdom. And they were able to convince these people who would have arose and stopped a unified despot or tyrant from ever ascending to power. And he very quietly removed them and sent them away, removed them from their power bases, removed them from any chance of actually stopping him. And basically during this Age of Heroes has consolidated his hold on the Blessed Island with one goal in mind: the conquest of the Four Kingdoms.
Right. So the tyrant is now ruling Hourani with an iron fist. But what's funny about that is that the majority of the Tavians and Hourani people that have come to the Four Kingdoms, those are amongst the most noble and most civilized of their kind.
Yes.
And they're like presenting this great example for the people of the Four Kingdoms of their folk, and meanwhile back home it's all like
and so they've been talking about the Blessed Isle for generations as, hey, someday our people will come and we're gonna have this joyful union of cultures and exchange of information. And so in a lot of ways, in a lot of minds of those in the Four Kingdom who have heard of this Blessed Isle, kind of think of it as, hey, this is awesome. Someday this new light will come to the Four Kingdoms, and maybe that will kindle the fire that kind of sends the darkness back.
Yeah, this was in my head. This was a lot of inspiration from Avatar: The Last Airbender. Like, everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. Just like it all kind of comes from a place of appreciation of the themes and tones of that show that I thought we could maybe bring into myth a little bit. But the question I have for you is this: how do the people of the Four Kingdoms react to the Hourani people and the Tavians? How do they see them?
Well, I mean, as we've said, in a lot of ways, the Tavians are sort of a minority in the world of, or in the lands of the Four Kingdoms, right? Everything we've talked about lore-wise has been from the perspective of the Four Kingdoms, and there are these isolated pockets of these refuges that the Tavians have built to kind of establish points of light and points of respite for those who are out, opening their doors and welcoming people in. So the Tavians are going to stand out as a sort of, either you've heard legends of them, or maybe there's one in your city. Having one in an adventuring group is going to could raise some eyebrows depending on where you go. But the other thing is that the Tavians have a reputation in the Four Kingdoms of sort of that, especially in the wilds. Well, hey, we can go to that Tavian redoubt and they'll protect us. So again, as we said, we kind of seeded the Tavians as sort of the most noble and the best of their people are the ones that got sent out, because those are really the ones that would have stopped this rise of the tyrant. And so it is a little unbalanced. And I think that, as the myth story develops, maybe as your myth story develops, when the tyrant comes, the other shoe falls, and how the people of the Four Kingdoms react to the Tavians is going to change drastically.
I think we need to have a whole section in our book about Hourani cuisine.
I agree. We're just talking about that. Yeah.
I mean, okay, so do they eat naga? I mean, is snake like a delicacy? Do they have like all that, Asian style, very, dishes, a lot of rice and fish, obviously, probably.
Yeah, I mean, you got an island that is very removed and very remote. So in my mind, like seafood, it's probably a little bit more tropical. So a lot of fruit, fruit and seafood were really kind of what kind of came to my head as soon as we started talking about what to do. I don't know. Like, I don't know if they would eat the Naga. I feel like, on one level, there's this very primal reaction between snakes and mongoose that I kind of like. On the other hand, I think eating a sentient creature, even if it's an evil one, is kind of an act that could be beyond the pale, even for ancient enemies. So
I guess what I'm saying is I feel like their food would have some exotic elements to it, where people on the mainland would either be a little like, oh, I'm not sure about that, or, oh my God, this tastes amazing, you've got to try it.
Yes.
Like, I think that's like the two extremes of Nazi cuisine.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, like an interesting idea to kind of just take a part, if we ever do a book on the Blessed Isle, and just talk about, what are these cultural beats and tones that differ from the Four Kingdoms? Because we've talked in a lot of ways that the Four Kingdoms kind of have that traditional fantasy feel and flair to them. So, yeah.
So if I make a character who's a Tavian or from, because you can play a human who's from Hourani as well.
Mm-hmm.
The core conflicts that I'm going to be looking at are, maybe I am one of those people the tyrant got out of his way, or maybe I am a believer in the fact that my culture is superior and I want to share it with you, or maybe I am maybe I'm actually even more idealistic than that and thinking there's ways to not only lead by example, but also like bring home some of the things that I think are good about the Four Kingdoms, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. I like the idea of playing a human from the Four Kingdoms, maybe a orphan who was left at one of these redoubts and kind of grew up idolizing all of this, and only to find out that, so one of the things, the reason we built kind of the Tavians the way we did is we always go back to the core themes of myth, the idea of light versus darkness, of knowledge versus ignorance, what to do with knowledge. And so there's this idea that the Tavians, the first Tavians that came, sort of show up as these bearers of light and knowledge that can aid the Four Kingdoms. So to find out, oh, really, one of my, the person who founded our order was one of those people who was loyal to the tyrant and came here to basically send people out to gather information, and is enacting secret rites to send information to prepare the way for these armies. Oh, what a great story concept for a character. I mean, that's just got like all of the themes of myth sort of wrapped up into one, ready to go. Like just toss the match in and watch it explode.
I think you could look at it from another way too. I mean, we've talked about how Hourani is a place where that celebrates discipline and civilization. But whenever you have that, you also have a very stratified society. You also have a place where there are people who would not fit very well. Mm-hmm. And I can imagine someone coming to the Four Kingdoms and being like, you know what? I am done with discipline, and I'm done with being told what my place is in society. And the Four Kingdoms let me be who I want to be, right? I can almost see a Disney princess-esque journey from the Hourani into the Four Kingdoms.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, there's things to celebrate about the Blessed Isle, but you could also have a character who's like, no, I am so glad to get away from everything that place represents.
Well, I mean, it's the story of, when you first go off on your own, whether it's to college or your first job out of the house, and suddenly all of those restrictions that had been put on you are gone, and you are the only master of your own discipline. You're like, I'm going for it. Like, I'm going to do whatever I want. And that there is this idea that the Four Kingdoms represent sort of that almost Wild West setting for those from the Blessed Isle, that, well, anything is possible here.
Absolutely. And I think lastly, what would be a really interesting story beat would be, just trying to warn people about the real threat of the Naga. I mean, they have a actual for real god that is routinely awakened. And when that goddess awakens, I mean, the Naga are a serious problem. And I could almost imagine someone coming to the Four Kingdoms and saying, you're not taking this seriously. You don't really understand what's going to happen to your coastal cities if their goddess awakens again, right? you could almost have the sort of, maybe not quite like a samurai's tale, maybe more of a doomsayer, like, the end is near. But you could combine the two or tweak it in any fashion you wish. But I could definitely imagine like a Tavian or a Hourani human with he's a pupil with his sword. He's a sword master, and he comes to town after town. He's like, watch the seas.
Yeah, something almost like a Cassandra complex where everyone's like,
yeah,
whatever, crazy person, like,
right.
We don't believe, or even, pulling the rug out on the players, and say they're all from this, they're all kind of bought into this Hourani character concepts and archetypes, and you get about 5 or 6 sessions into the campaign, and they've been touting all of this, and then you're like, yeah, now you find out what's really coming. How do you now convince everyone who you have convinced one thing that now they need to prepare and defend? Because, I mean, really, like, the 4 kingdoms are going to be like, really, there's some island out in the middle of the ocean, and they're, yeah, okay, whatever. We have bigger threats to deal with right now, and we've survived since the Age of Steel, thank you very much. Right. We're going to be okay, and they have no clue what's actually coming.
Yeah, I imagine there would be a lot of warnings that fall on deaf ears. Again, right?
Another theme of myth that we keep coming back to.
And I think that the last thing I would even consider talking about is the contrast between the Tavians and the Hourani, because you have one with the Hourani, you have the tale of a civilization that has crumbled and has led to a degeneration of their people. And the only, true Hourani are just the last dregs, the ones living on the fringes of what was once a great people and a great land. And now instead, the flip side of that is with the Tavians, you have their civilization is ascending. They're on the rise, and the ones who are on the fringes are actually, they have in common with the Hourani that the ones who are on the fringes of that society are the ones who are the most heroic, the most ethical, if you will. And I imagine the Hourani would have some tales to tell about what could happen if the tyrant is not dealt with.
Right, because they have their own tyrant from their own history and I think that's another thing that we wanted to look at with the Tavians, is so often in fantasy we have humans being the young race and the only race that's sort of, or the only species, if you will, that's ascending. Well, we wanted this other species to also, I mean, we have the Hourani and we have the elves and the dwarves who their time has passed. But it doesn't just have to be a human-centric story. There is this other species, and they're ascending too, and that's actually a core of the conflict between them and the 4 kingdoms. Because, they're an ascending civilization, but also one that the darkness has very quickly cut to the core of. What does that mean? What does that look like?
The one thing I think I would want to bring back to the island, like right away, if I was a Tavian, is I would be like, oh my God, the TikToks, this would change everything. It would change
everything. Oh, now I want to play a TikTok pupil, right? The one that was rebuilt by, thinks that, like, if it can just get the right process, it will become a sword master, because it will just continually flow from like one part of its programming to the next, and that will be its expression of perfection. We got to make TikToks, Ross. I know we don't have room for them in our first wave, but we got to make TikToks.
Wave 2 TikToks confirmed. Let's just do that. But I think that unless you have anything else, I think that brings us to a pretty good conclusion on Hourani, the Blessed Island, and the Tavians.
I agree. I really like the Tavians. I'm really appreciative to the guys of Myth, to Brian and Keith, for saying, hey, run with this however you like. And it's one of my favorite parts of being able to write the story of Myth, is really looking at the Tavians and how they interact with the 4 kingdoms.
So what do you guys think about the Tavians or any of the lore that we've talked about in our Campfire chats? Please be sure to let us know. Drop a note in the comments. We like to read those, and you can tell us about something you'd like us to talk about more in the future, because there is a lot of lore to go over.
Mm-hmm.
And Ulysses International has a great channel right now. They're doing shows on Aventuria, The Dark Eye, also Fading Suns has got a great show going on right now. And JM is running 2 different live plays that you can find on their channel as well.
Yep, Fading Suns and Torg. We should, by the time this one releases, we should be 2 or 3 sessions into both Torg and our new arc on Fading Suns. So check them out. Go back and check Annals of Antioch. We wrapped that up. And then Ross, they've got a new show, or the Ulysses Worlds show. What is that?
Right, that is a show where Robert Aducci and Timothy Brown, who are a couple of big guys at the Ulysses International Studio, they talk about what's going on with Ulysses as a company, what's the new things that are coming up. We have a lot of crowdfundings going. We have a lot of new games and new expansions in the works. They interview designers. I'm actually being interviewed on one of their shows. So make sure you go check that out. We talk a lot about Touring Eternity and the Living Land on my episode. Yeah, I think that there's a bunch of great shows on the channel, so please go have a look if you're interested in hearing more about the different games that Ulysses makes. And so until next time.
Yeah, keep telling stories.